This is Pre-Millenium Signs, video number 6. Today we're going to talk about the negative signs that happen during the barley harvest. So you remember that the tribulation times are divided into a number of harvests. So the barley harvest is a 3.5-year time of trials in which things aren't too bad. So you can think of it like barley just needs to be shaken to be harvested. Then will come the wheat harvest when the wheat needs to be actually thrashed and beaten, and then the chaff comes out. And then you have the grape harvest, which is when the grapes are crushed. So key here is understanding that things kind of go from bad to worse. So the barley harvest isn't too bad. And we're going to talk today about some of the negative signs that happen here. So for instance, the missions stop because the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. So missionary work as we know it ends. That's a big sign that everyone will be able to see. And then you're going to have the rise of this character that many people know as the Antichrist, although that word is actually not used for him anywhere in the scriptures that I've found. What names he does have are the King of the North, the Little Horn, or the Stout Horn, are what Daniel calls him. John calls him the Mouth, and Isaiah calls him the Assyrian. And then you have persecution that also happens during this period. So let's get into talking about these. First of all, there's the persecution of the saints. This is going to increase. I don't know that it happens all at once, but it will certainly increase. Let's read actually Heber C. Kimball talking about this time. He said, "After a while, the Gentiles will gather by the thousands to this place, and Salt Lake City will be classed among the wicked cities of the world. A spirit of speculation and extravagance will take possession of the saints, and the results will be financial bondage." Check. We're there yet already. Next, persecution comes, and all true Latter-day Saints will be tested to the limit. Many will apostatize, and others will be still, not knowing what to do. Darkness will cover the earth, and gross darkness the minds of the people. The judgments of God will be poured out upon the wicked, to the extent that our elders from far and near will be called home. That's that fullness of the Gentiles. Or in other words, the gospel will be taken from the Gentiles and later carried to the Jews. So this is this time of persecution. It coincides just ahead of the cessation of missionary work the way it's being done now. Also in Doctrine and Covenants 105:6, it talks about this persecution. So what this is bias, distrust, rumors, discrimination, legal measures, and possibly destruction of property and physical harm against the Latter-day Saints, their property, and the church organization. It may be part of a larger persecution against those of faith or Christians. To some degree, this is already starting, and I think this will continue to ramp up until the wheat harvest, when the church administration will probably be outlawed or collapse, as we saw happen among the Nephites. So why is this going to be happening? It's because as the world becomes more and more polarized, which we've all seen that happen, there will be no middle ground, and those with the opposite view will persecute others. Also, the saints will need to learn obedience through suffering, and to allow the wicked to be condemned by their actions. This is going to be hard. It's not easy to take suffering when it's not justified, but that's going to humble us. If we can recognize that persecution will be part of our sanctification, then I think it'll be easier for us to make it through. This is why it's important to know the why of these signs of the times. So where this is likely going to be in the U.S. and the Western world first, and then possibly worldwide. Right now, I would say it's worldwide already, and now it's moving to the Western world and the U.S. So who? The Latter-day Saints and the church organization, and persecution against Christians in general. That has already started. So when is this going to be? Well, for many of us who are in California, we remember Proposition 8 in 2008, and then again in 2020 with those who didn't want the forced COVID measures. And in 22-23, there's been legal action taken in several countries against the church's finances. So this persecution has already started, and I think it's going to continue to ramp up. So the next one, The great and abominable church gathers many to fight against Christ. So here Nephi, the very first Nephi, talks about this. And he uses the words, the great and abominable church, which he also defines as the church of the devil, or the whore of all the earth, or Babylon. There's lots of names for this amalgamation of people who are being inspired in some ways by Satan. So look what he says. It came to pass, I looked and I beheld the whore of all the earth, and she sat upon many waters. So it's across all nations. And she had dominion over all the earth among all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. And it came to pass that I beheld the church of the Lamb of God, and its numbers were few, because of the wickedness and abominations of the whore who sat upon many waters. So I think it's really important that we realize that those who are the church of the Lamb of God are those who are trying to do God's will and who are not asleep. Remember then the parable of the 10 virgins, half of them were asleep and did not have oil in their lamps. They thought they were part of that church of the Lamb. Likewise, the whore of the earth, the great and abominable church, is not just the other churches that are not our church. That is not a good way to put it. I would say instead, you have to realize that there are many people, that Joseph Smith said, who are in other denominations, who are earnestly seeking the truth. They just don't know where to find it yet. And so those people also can be part of the church of the Lamb of God. So important thing is, do we love Jesus? Are we trying to follow him? Are we staying awake? So Nephi goes on and he says, I beheld that the church of the Lamb, who were the saints of God, were also upon all the face of the earth, and their dominions upon the face of the earth were small because of the wickedness of the great whore whom I saw. And it came to pass that I beheld that the great mother of abominations did gather together multitudes, so not just one group, upon the face of all the earth among all the nations of the Gentiles to fight against the Lamb of God. And so this persecution here is more general. It's to fight against, I'd say, Christianity, against anything that's good. But going back to this idea here that there's this gathering together, I think we see that now. I think you can see in politics, there's the gathering together of many different groups to fight against that which is good. Groups that might even otherwise be against each other gather together to fight against that which is good. So why is this happening? This is because the devil inspires opposition to those that are trying to follow Christ. These many organizations are inspired to oppose everything that's good. The gathering of the tares and their staying in the field that will be burned is part of the parable of the wheat and the tares. The devil won't support his children, and the Assyrian, who is what many people call the Antichrist, will not protect these bundles of the great and abominable church that might have even supported him. In fact, at one point, he will destroy those that tried to follow him in the great and abominable church because he wants complete control. Important thing to take out of this, who are these people? All nations and peoples will be gathered into these different religions, ideologies, and political groups that lead people away from Christ. So when is this going to happen? The great and abominable church has existed for thousands of years. It certainly existed in Nephi's time. But it will oppose the true church whenever it exists upon the earth. This is going to intensify, as Nephi saw in the last days, until the great and abominable church is destroyed by the Assyrian and his beast kingdom. So this is the great and abominable church. During the barley harvest, it is going to be the primary opposition to everything that's good. And we see that today. All right. Now there's going to be the rise of this individual that many call the Antichrist. In the scriptures, the little or stout horn, the mouth, the Assyrian. And this is going to be the leader eventually of this fourth beast government or kingdom. A lot of great scriptures that talk about him. Let's go to a few of these. So this is Daniel chapter 11, verse 21. So Daniel says here, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Now, those of you who are reading in the Book of Mormon, you remember Amalickiah. Amalickiah very much sounds like this type of the Antichrist that Daniel is explaining here. And we'll go to the next one here. And this is Daniel 7, verses 20, 24, and 25. So in verse 20, and of the 10 horns. So the horns are leaders. They are people that were in his head, meaning this beast kingdom at the end. So they had 10 powerful individuals here. And of the others which came up, and before whom 3 fell, 3 of these horns, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. So this is the stout horn. He is one of the 10 horns. And he is also called the little horn. So in the beginning, it sounds like he is not the top dog, but he takes out 3 of these horns. And from that point, he becomes the top leader of this beast kingdom. And you'll see that this horn here makes war with the saints and prevails against them. So there's going to be some times where it's very difficult. I think it's going to look like this Assyrian or horn is victorious. And you know what's interesting is another name. The horn that's being referenced here is not the horn like on an animal. This is like the horn that makes noise. So this is a trumpet. So it's interesting because you're going to have, as this guy comes into power, the 7 trumpets that come after him that warn people. But yeah, these leaders are trumpets, you could say, these 10 horns. So now we're going to go to verses 24 and 25. Daniel says, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom, so you can see this beast is a kingdom, are 10 kings. So there it defines the horns that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So that's basically Daniel getting the explanation here of verse 20. And he shall speak great words, so we know it's a man, against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. So there's been a lot of speculation on who this person is. Not super important at this time. We will see when the time comes, we will absolutely know who this is. But in the beginning, it may not be clear. I would say during the barley harvest, while this horn is rising, we probably will have a lot of discussion among ourselves and disagreement about who this person is. But we do know it's a person that's a man, and we do know a few things about this person. They are going to definitely wear out the saints, and they're going to want to change things. So times and laws. Certainly we can see the changing of things right now as governments try to change what used to be into things that don't make a whole lot of sense. And we see here, he's going to be victorious for a time, and it tells us that's a time and times and the dividing of time. Most people believe that a time is a year, and so times would be 2 years, and a dividing of time would be a half. So this is where you get the 3.5 year increments. So the barley harvest, the wheat harvest, the grape harvest. So it's my understanding right now that this time when he is undefeated will be during the wheat harvest. So during the barley harvest, he is rising up in power. We may not recognize him, but during the wheat harvest, he will seem like he is completely victorious. Okay, so this trump, this horn, this trumpet, he is going to be gathering together all of the tares. Just as there's a gathering of wheat to Zion, there's a gathering of the tares underneath this Assyrian, is what I'm going to stick with, and his beast kingdom. And this gathering is first going to be to these bundles or multitudes that are in the great and abominable church. And the great and abominable church is the harlot which rides on the beast. And so those two will be thick as thieves. They'll be close together, helping each other until the midpoint which is in between the wheat harvest and the grape harvest. And at this point, the beast and the Assyrian are going to destroy the great and abominable church. So the devil does not support his own, and this Assyrian, this powerful person, is not going to want to share power with any multitudes. He will want to be the only one. So where is this going to happen? So I believe that this is going to happen in America and the Western world because they're described as these kings of the north. The eagle of America, many believe, becomes Ezra's three-headed eagle. They believe that that has already happened, and that is quite possible, which then becomes part of an amalgamated fourth beast kingdom, which seems like a one-world government. I think most people can see that that's the direction we're moving. So this could be something that's already in progress. It started maybe with the League of Nations and then the UN. So who is this going to be? Well, the horns are powerful individuals who are not elected. That is one thing that's clear. But they hold power as kings for a time. And they give their power to the beast and the dragon. So this could be a powerful person like a George Soros or a Schwab. Likely, the little stout horn, the Assyrian, is a rich, powerful American, in my opinion. But until that person takes power completely, I think we will all be in a little bit of doubt. Some people think it's Trump. Some people think it's Obama. Some people think it's somebody else, Elon Musk. There's a million different theories, and let's not argue over that part right now. He might be one of the three horns removed by the stout horn. Could be one of the Obamas possibly, but we simply aren't going to know right now. So when is this going to happen? The little horn may not be recognized until the 7-year treaty is organized with Israel that stops the daily sacrifice. Certainly, as the Assyrian, he will be recognized leading his armies and trying to destroy Zion. So we will know who this is eventually. But be patient until that time. Certainly come up with your ideas, but let's not fight about it. So let's read a couple more scriptures here to just understand this person a little better. So you hear of wars in far countries, and you say that there will soon be great wars in far countries, but you know not the hearts of men in your own land. This is part of the reason I believe it's someone here in America. Plus, I think that as Zion is going to be gathered primarily here in the Americas as the center stake, I think likely Satan's going to mirror that and have a leader from here in America be that Antichrist, that Assyrian. So let's go now to Revelations 13, 5 through 8. A little more details about this person. And there was given unto him a mouth, meaning unto this beast kingdom, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 40 and 2 months. 40 and 2 months is roughly 3.5 years, but not exactly. And we'll get into that later. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. So this is a person. To blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. So he's going after everyone. He's going after the Lord. He's going after his temple and even heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So this makes me believe that this person will also be charismatic. I don't think that they're just going to be someone that's an army leader. They're going to be flattering. They're going to be charismatic. Many people will think that this person is bringing perhaps world peace and unity and will be deceived by that. So let's go back now to Isaiah and see where he's called the Assyrian. So here God says, for he saith, meaning this leader, this Assyrian, the king of Assyria, by the strength of my hand have I done it, and by my wisdom, for I am prudent, and I have removed the bounds of the people, and have robbed their treasures, and I have put down the inhabitants like a valiant man. And my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathereth eggs that are left, have I gathered all the earth, and there was none that moved the wing or opened the mouth or peeped. So a little bit arrogant, this person, and they will certainly be smart, and they will think they are wise, and they will be victorious for a time. And it will seem to many probably that all is lost. However, this person will be taken down by Jesus Christ in the end in Jerusalem at the Battle of Armageddon. All right, so also within the barley harvest, the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled. We've already talked about this. I went through what this is in the scriptures that talk about it. The wars and rumors of wars. So this one we've all heard a lot. Let's talk about kind of what this is, and then we'll go read the scriptures. So these are wars poured out on the great and abominable church. Why? Because of the wickedness of the people. And the great and abominable church will be persecuting the saints. So God is going to allow these wars so the wicked can destroy the wicked. Now, will everyone who is killed in the wars be wicked? Unfortunately not. Joseph Smith has said it's not a sound principle to believe that the saints will completely escape this, but it is something for us to know that the primary reason of this is to allow the wicked to destroy each other. So where will this happen? At this point in the barley harvest, I believe this will be outside of the United States. And who will it be? These wicked people fighting other wicked people primarily. When? This will be during the beginning of the tribulation. So this barley harvest, this first 3.5 years. Let's read the scriptures that talk about this. All right, Nephi says, "And it came to pass that I beheld that the wrath of God was poured out upon that great and abominable church, insomuch that there were wars and rumors of wars among all the nations and kindreds of the earth." That is happening now, and I think just like the persecution, that is going to ramp up. It's going to continue getting worse and worse as more and more wars happen. So let's go now to Mark 13:8. This one's pretty famous. "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be earthquakes in divers places, and there shall be famines and troubles. These are the beginning of sorrows." So Christ here frames these things as happening at the beginning of these tribulations, these sorrows. So that's why I put this within the barley harvest as the starting point for this really ramping up. All right, let's go now to Doctrine and Covenants. Let's go to actually 63:33, since we've already read this one. "I have sworn in my wrath and decreed wars upon the face of the earth, and the wicked shall slay the wicked, and fear shall come upon every man. And the saints also shall hardly escape. Nevertheless, I, the Lord, am with them, and I will come down in heaven from the presence of my Father and consume the wicked with unquenchable fire." So the Lord will help the righteous. However, it's going to be hard to escape. They will hardly escape. So there's going to be some difficulty involved in this. Not everyone necessarily will escape. Some will be called to go back to heaven. And that might not be a bad thing, because these will be difficult times coming up. All right. So in conjunction with this, you see this in Doctrine and Covenants 87:4, this idea of slaves rising up against masters. So let's read this first. And this is in the chapter or the section that's talking about war. And many people think this is about solely the Civil War, because it starts out with the southern states shall be divided against the northern states. But you'll notice this goes on until war is poured out on all nations. And now it says, after that, it shall come to pass after many days, slaves shall rise up against their masters, who shall be marshaled and disciplined for war. To me, this sounds like World War II. The many days are the years in between World War II and now, and these slaves rising up against their masters, who shall be marshaled and disciplined for war. So I think it's the masters here are marshaled and disciplined for war, and the slaves are rising up against them. Because remember, there's these wars going on. So I believe many nations today are oppressing their people to such a degree that they are slaves rather than citizens. And God prophesies that these slaves will rise up. So this is bad, but it's also good, because people need to come out from underneath oppression. Why? The church specifically refrains from making people dissatisfied with their government situation. You will see this. The church does not oppose political parties. It does not even oppose injustices that happen like slavery. However, God prophesies that these slaves will rise up, and he is going to help them. So where? This seems to be worldwide, affecting all nations. Who? Those allowed to be held in servitude or oppressed by their governments are going to rise up against their masters. It doesn't necessarily say they're going to be successful, but they are going to rise up against their masters. When? Many thought this was the first American Civil War. However, very few slaves rose up at that point. No specific marker is given, but this is likely to happen as governments become more oppressive and controlling. And we've seen a lot of that since 2020. It seems to come after wars poured out and before the remnants of Jacob in America marshal themselves. So this particular thing, I believe, is going to be during the barley harvest. And then last here, a civil war in the United States. So this is interesting. This I would take with a grain of salt because this is only documented here in these Milton Musler papers. There's something similar to this in, if you've read Visions of Glory, on page 106, you'll see descriptions that sound like this, that corroborate that. But really, in the scriptures or in more well-documented quotes, I don't have this, so take this with a grain of salt. But what is predicted here? It's predicted that there's going to be riots in Chicago because of the devaluation of the dollar, leading to anarchy and civil war. Now, that's very foreseeable. I think anyone living in 2024 could look at that and say, yeah, that could happen, and very soon. Manufacturing and farming will become impossible because of the constant danger. Why? The devaluation of the dollar is the trigger, but wickedness and the love of men waxing cold are happening now. And the polarization that we see politically is setting the stage as we are directed to hate our fellows. Men are directed to hate women. Women are directed to hate men. One race versus another race. One nation versus another nation. That's all Satan. Where? I think this is primarily in the United States, starting in Chicago. Who? People living in the USA, town against town, neighborhood against neighborhood. It's not likely to be a clean civil war like in the North and the South in the 1800s. When? This is unknown, but in my opinion, this could either happen during the barley or the wheat harvest. More likely the wheat harvest after the natural disasters that opened the seventh seal. So let's read this and get kind of an idea of how this works. So this is the quote. So this is Nephi Packard. There's a letter that he wrote, and this is collected in the Milton Musler papers. So my brother Noah Packard says that he heard the prophet Joseph say that the next great U.S. Civil War after the War of the Rebellion, the Civil War of the 1860s between the North and the South, would commence in a little town now called Chicago, but at that time it would have grown to a very large city. And another brother told me that the prophet said that the cause of the next great trouble of the United States would be the depreciation of the currency of the United States. Well, all that rings pretty true so far. And just remember that it's hard to correlate this. This is somebody who said they heard it, that their brother heard it. So we have to take this with a grain of salt. So some other quotes around this would be, let's go up here. This is Orson Pratt. What then will be the condition of that people when this great and terrible war shall come? It will be very different from the war between the North and the South. Do you wish me to describe it? I will do so. It will be a war of neighborhood against neighborhood, city against city, town against town, county against county, state against state. And they will go forth destroying and being destroyed, and manufacturing will, in great measure, cease for a time among the American nation. Why? Because in these terrible wars, they will not be privileged to manufacture. There will be too much bloodshed, too much mobocracy, too much going forth in bands and destroying and pillaging the land to suffer people to pursue any local vocation with any degree of safety. What will become of the millions of farmers upon that land? They will leave their farms and they will remain uncultivated, and they will flee before the ravaging armies from place to place, and thus they will go forth burning and pillaging the whole country. And that great and powerful nation, now consisting of some 40 million people, will be wasted away unless they repent. So that's in the Journal of Discourses. So I think that it's important that what we get out of this is that it sounds like it's very likely that there's going to be anarchy and civil war. Not exactly clear when this is going to happen, but important for us to know that that is likely to happen. There are a couple of different sources that talk about this. They're not all exactly the same, but you get the idea that this is going to be something that happens. So that's it for the signs and the barley harvest. I just want to close by saying, I know that it can seem overwhelming at times, all these different scriptures, all of the things that happen. What's important to realize is if you can recognize these signs happening and are watching for them, you will have greater faith and less fear, because you'll know God knew that all this stuff was going to happen before. I mean, just to give you an idea, here on this idea of the Assyrian, there's this harmony between Ezra and Daniel and John on how these things happen. So you have here in Daniel this chronology where Daniel uses the symbol of the king of the north and the king of the south constantly fighting back and forth. He doesn't tell you what the names of them are because it's a title. And so there are several kings of the north and the south. My understanding is the king of the north is a leader of the Western world, as we would call it today. King of the south, it sounds like, is more a leader of the Muslim nations. And so there's this battle back and forth between them. We've seen that all in our lifetimes. And here we see in Daniel chapter 11, verse 14, this king of the south is going to be fighting against many people. Those who oppress the Jews during this time will exalt themselves. They'll feel like, whoa, we're winning, but they're going to fall. I think this is happening right now. It's starting to happen. And I think that's where we are in this sequence of kings of the north. So then you have this third to the last king of the north who comes in, and they're going to invade the Middle East and Israel successfully. I think that's happening next. We can see all that gearing up right now with the things that are happening in the Middle East. So it says that this king of the north is then going to be victorious. He's going to take over Israel and the rest of the Middle East, probably in the name of peace. And then he's going to think to attack forts in his own land, but he will die. Then you have this second to the last king of the north, who is a raiser of taxes. Also not hard to see in this time. But this person has a very short reign before dying. And the last king of the north is described as a vile person. And they obtain the kingdom by flattery. I believe this last king of the north is the same as the Assyrian, or the little horn, or the stout horn of the mouth. This is this guy here. And I think this lines up really well. If you do know Ezra's eagle, the idea is there's an eagle with two wings with lots of feathers on it, and each feather represents a president of the United States. So the idea behind Ezra's eagle is that there is a eagle that is one of these beast nations. And most people believe that Ezra's eagle is representative of the United States. We have an eagle that we use as our state bird. But each of the wings of this eagle has feathers on it that represent different presidents. And if you're looking at this prophecy, there's a lot of great videos that can go into more detail than I will here. The idea is that the last two feathers of Ezra's eagle are thinking they're going to be president, but they're not. And instead you have these eagle heads that take power. So there's 3 eagle heads. And during most of the time of these presidents, they've been quiet, and now they take over. So I believe this lines up really well with the kings of the north that are described in here. So this third to the last king of the north in Daniel 11, 15 through 19 lines up well with the middle eagle head. This middle eagle head is described in 2 Ezra 11 through 11, verse 29, as taking control, ruling oppressively, and then dying in bed. So this sounds a lot like the third to the last king of the north, who invades Israel and the Middle East successfully, thinks to attack his own land, but will die. So the left eagle head takes out this middle eagle head and has a short reign, but is assassinated by the right head. So here, the second to the last king of the north is a raiser of taxes, has a short reign before dying. And you find out later on that this last king of the north likely killed these two previous ones. So in Ezra's eagle, the right eagle head takes control and dies by the sword. Here, the last king of the north is vile. It obtains the kingdom by flattery. This is the one who is defeated by Christ in the end. I believe this lines up with the mouth that John describes as being the leader who takes out three other horns. Those other horns could easily be the different eagle heads or these previous kings of the north. So I think there is a very tight alignment between these three. Whether the Assyrian or this last ruler of the beast kingdom is the last king of the north and the right eagle head or someone after that, once again, not completely clear, but what's important is to realize that there is an alignment between these three prophets here, between John, Daniel, and Ezra on this. And so if you're looking for these things and you start seeing them happen, you can say, oh, okay, I can see where they're on the middle eagle head. It sounds like we're on the third to last king of the north. So that's really the key of this. It's the important thing is to look for these signs on your own. Go read these scriptures on your own. Find what the Spirit teaches you. And if there's some things that I missed, share them with me, because I'm learning too. This is a process where each of us is trying to come closer to Christ by understanding these prophecies by the Spirit.